Welcome back, everyone. This is Mark with Vinyl Crush, and this is my second installment of my Mazzy's Coleman collection presentation. This will be the last video I'm going to do on this. I'm just going to show a variety of the records that I got in. I can't show all of them. It would take way too many videos. But I wanted to show sort of a eclectic mix of what I got, and this is the second video of that. For those of you who don't know, Mazzy's pretty well known. He's got a great channel. I'll put a link below. It's Norman Maslov on YouTube. Amazing channel. He inspired me to get started doing this. Mazzy, a close friend of his who was an avid record collector, passed away, and Mazzy bought his record collection from the estate, and there's about 5,000 records. So I had an opportunity to go up and be one of the first people to go through the collection and pull some records, and so I'm going to show a few more of what I got here today. So again, I'll put a link to Mazzy's channel below, and let's dive in. The first thing that I want to show, in the last video I showed the Beatles mono box set. So in this video I'm going to show the Rolling Stones mono box set. This came out in 2016. This is numbered, and this is number 1814 out of 10,000, I think. This is mastered by Robert Ludwig at Gateway Studios, Gateway Mastering, his own mastering studio. There was a lot of interesting conversation going on online about this set, because while it was mastered from mostly the original tapes, somewhere in the loop there was a digital switch. So there's a digital element in the mastering and in the mastering process. So a lot of people were very disappointed in that. Unlike the Beatles box set, which the mono version was completely mastered from the analog tapes with no digital trace at all. And the digital trace, there is a difference. You can hear a difference. There's no question between something that has a digital trace and something that does not. However, with this particular box set, the originals, when they made most of these albums, people were listening to them on AM radio or on, the majority of the kids who were listening to this stuff back then had very inexpensive record players. And if you cut the record too hot, if there's too much bass and too much really powerful guitar on the record, then the needle would jump off of the vinyl. So it was cut too hot, the needle would jump and you couldn't play it. So intentionally, they decided to master all of these records so that wouldn't happen. So they're cut not hot at all. So when you listen to the original pressings of these, which I have many, they sound, there's not a lot of bass, there's not a lot of power in the sound. It's actually kind of flat sounding, sometimes a little tinny. It's mastered for the purpose of playing on inexpensive record players. So you have a choice between something that's mastered to sound like it's meant to play on a cheap record player, or something that's mastered and cut really hot and really nice, but it has a digital element in there. I've listened to both now, and in most cases, this is absolutely the better listen. The digital element doesn't bother me as much as the flat sounding recordings that they were doing before. The mono box set is all of the mono albums that were put out by the Rolling Stones. In many cases, there's some, just like with the Beatles, the Rolling Stones put out different albums in the US. Well, the record labels put out different albums in the US sometimes than they did in the UK. They were adding the singles to the albums, which they didn't do in the UK, and they were putting less songs on the albums to create more albums for later. So in the cases where this is a noticeable difference, this includes both the US and the UK versions. A good example of this is the album 12 by 5. In the UK, they put out an EP called 5 by 5. It was 5 songs by 5 musicians. And And the U.S. took that and added some other songs they hadn't used on a previous record or that they had from other places. And they created a whole album and called it 12 by 5 with 12 songs by 5 musicians. So that's an example of this. I think it was starting with their Satanic Majesty's request that from that point on, all the records had the same songs on them, much like with the Beatles, it was after Sgt. Pepper's. So there includes not just the UK, but some of the US versions in this, and that's also nice to have. This ends with 1968's Beggar's Banquet and 69's Let It Bleed, and after that they didn't do anything in mono. The box set is really nice, it's put together really well. The album covers suck. I'll give you an example of their Satanic Majesties. They didn't put a lot of effort into the album covers at all. They did make a booklet to go with it, and I was very happy with this. There's a lot of new photos I had not seen before, and some of the information in here was actually very educational in understanding what they were doing, what they were going through, what they were writing, and there's a lot of information in this booklet. So this is a really well put together booklet. Really happy to get that with this. So I've listened to a number of the records. I haven't listened to all of them, and it's really nice to hear these cut a little hotter. It is sad that I think there's a number of reasons. I'm not going to go into them because there's been articles written about it. Why they did use the digital link, having to do with the fact that they were recorded in many different studios. They didn't just do like Abbey Road like the Beatles did. They recorded in the US, they recorded in the UK, they recorded in France. So anyway, great find for me. Really happy to have this. So the next album I want to show is Prince. This is Prince's second album. I've been looking for this for a long time. So when I saw this, I was really excited. This album, I'll tell you, this was mastered by Bernie Grundman. It was like number 1 on the R&B charts and number 20 or 22 on the top charts. So it did well. It has a song on here called I Want to Be Your Lover, which was a huge hit. I remember being in the discos in the 70s listening to that and dancing to it and loving that song. Great song. Also, Why You Want to Treat Me So Bad and Sexy Dance are on here. Good album. When I look this over, the matrix numbers on here say that it is a first pressing. However, later on, upon further research, I discovered that there is a second state album cover that has different credits down here. They changed the credits a little bit. And so I don't know if that means that this is a second press or if they changed the album covers and it's still a first press. Again, the matrix numbers say it's a first press. It's also got a little cut corner, which in early pressings like this usually mean that it's a promo copy. So tough call on whether this is an actual first press or not, but it's still a delight to have this record, and I'm happy to have gotten it. So the next album, again, it was so fun going through all these records and finding these really magical albums. This is a first pressing of Folsom Prison Blue, or Johnny Cass at Folsom Prison. This is a live album he did at Folsom Prison when he was, getting very popular, and I think the first album he did had Folsom Prison Blues on it, and it was also one of his first singles. And he used to get a lot of letters from his fans in prisons asking him to come and do shows at the prisons because they loved that song and they loved Johnny. He's a great artist. And so he actually did a few shows in prisons, and they went quite well. After kicking Johnny, he actually had a drug problem, and his career kind of started to slip downhill. So he did a bunch of work on himself. He kicked the drug habit and decided he wanted to do a live album. And after some changes in the personnel at Columbia, he got permission to do that. So he recorded 2 shows at Folsom Prison live, and this album is mostly pulled from the very first show. And I'll show you, this is a first pressing on Columbia 2i labels. Beautiful labels. The record's in really incredible shape, as most of these. I haven't been mentioning, I think with the Rolling Stones album, many of those had not been played at all. So this is in great shape. It's such an incredible listen. I love this album, and it's nice to hear a first pressing and feel the history of this record while listening to it. Really enjoying it. This was also a real turnaround album for Johnny. This album was #1 on the country charts, and the Folsom Prison Blues live version was a huge turnaround hit for him. So enjoying this record a lot. So this next record was one, again, I've been looking for this for a long time. It's the Staples Singers. It's called Be Altitude, Respect Yourself. They had put out a bunch of records before this that were mostly gospel, and they got signed with Stax, and they started putting out albums that were R&B, soul, and funk influenced albums. And this is, I think, the second album that they did that charted. The reason I was looking for this is it has one of my favorite all-time songs on here. It's called I'll Take You There. This album was recorded at Muscle Shoals. In fact, they talked about this album in the movie about Muscle Shoals, which if you haven't seen, I highly recommend taking in. It's a great documentary about the recording studio. This album was recorded there in the song I'll Take You There, which if for some reason you haven't heard that song, please go listen to it. It is the bass line and the feel of the song, Mavis Staples' voice and the lyrics, everything about this song is magical. It is so funky. It is such a perfect song. I really love it. So anyway, this is also on first pressing. It's pressed at Monarch. The Monarch pressing plant is one of my favorites. First pressing on Stax Records. Beautiful album. Really good condition. And I love seeing that it's a Monarch pressing as well. Recorded at Muscle Shoals, and in the song I'll Take You There, Mavis, each of the members does a little solo, and she calls out their names. So she's calling out the names of the members of the house band for Muscle Shoals. All of them happen to be, the main members of the band happen to be white, the musicians. And the legend has it that Paul Simon listened to this record and said, I want to record in Muscle Shoals with those black musicians. Not knowing that, and he was told, well, you can record down there, but I got to tell you something. But anyway, it makes sense why he would say that, because it is really such a beautiful, funky album, and especially that song, I'll Take You There. Again, even if you've heard it before, go and listen to it again, just to remember what a great and perfect song that song is. So again, another album I've been looking really hard for. This is an original pressing of Peggy Lee's Black Coffee. Acoustic Sounds just reissued this a year ago, I think. I actually have a 45 RPM version of this, which definitely sounds a little better than this, but there's something about hearing this, even though this is not the very first pressing. This came out in 1953 on a 10-inch. And then they added a bunch of songs and reissued it on a 12-inch in about 56, I think. Great album. Her voice is so magical, and the songs on here are incredible. This was not a huge hit necessarily for her when it came out, but is now considered a classic and one of her best albums, I think. It was great to get a hold of it. This is a first pressing. I'll show you the back. This is, 1956. First pressing on Decca, black and silver labels, and it's got a little bit of kind of surface noise, especially when you put the needle down on the first song, and then it just quiets and the album plays really well. So really, when I saw this, I was just, wow, another record. Again, I was going through these records. I can't afford to buy them all. And then okay, oh my God, I have to take this. So this is one of those, oh my God albums I was really happy to get. So this next album was also a delight to find. This is one of the best albums ever made. It goes on the top of the list. This came out in 1977 originally. Rumours by Fleetwood Mac. This is their second album with Buckingham Nicks. All the themes on this album a lot of them are based around the fact that Christine and John McVie and Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were all, the couples were breaking up. There's also a lot of drug use and a lot of stuff going on. And so the album has a lot of darkness, a lot of anger is being expressed back and forth, a lot of longing is being expressed back and forth in these songs. And there's just not a bad song on this album. Every single song on here is incredible. This is a 2011 Record Store Day remaster. There's, I think, 4,000 copies of this made. It's gatefold. So this is the first big remaster, 45 RPM, done for Record Store Day in 2011. This was cut by Kevin Gray and Stephen Hoffman at RTI and pressed at Palace. It's an amazing recording. I've heard this before on a nice stereo years and years ago, but never actually had a copy of this particular pressing, and really delighted to have it. This is really kind of a collector's item. And on top of that, on side 3 and 4 on the record labels, there's a misprint, which even makes it more valuable, apparently. So we know how that goes. Great album, and it sounds so good on 45 RPM. This album was recorded and mastered so well to begin with. So really delighted to get a hold of this. This next album was not one that I was hunting for. It's just one that I saw and I went, oh my gosh, I really want this record. It's Bjork. It's her second album. It's called Post. It came out in, I think, 1995. This is the first UK pressing. I'll show you. It's, the artwork on here is beautiful and interesting as the music. Bjork is quite a versatile and goes outside the box in terms of her. This is on, I think it's 10 One Little Indian. Maybe it's called One Little Indian. I can't remember the label. Maybe it's 10 Little Indian. Anyway, nice to have a first pressing from the UK where this was from. It's an incredible record. Her music is all over the place. So I don't like all of her albums. I shouldn't say I don't need to own all of her albums. The other album of hers that I own that I love is her work with the Sugar Cubes. It has a song in there called Birthday, and I heard that song and I had to get that record. Amazing song. Bjork's vocal gymnastics on that and on this album are just absolutely incredible. Really worth the listen. This album is really experimental for its time with heavy trip-hop influences. Trip-hop, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a fusion of hip-hop and electronica to a degree that you really don't hear it as hip-hop or electronica. It's its own little genre, literally, but it's a mixture of those two. And there's just such a great groove on this album. The beats are really cool. She's got some great songs on here and just love her voice. So I was really happy to get lucky and grab this record. So this next album is another one that I've been looking for a clean copy of. They're not easy to find in Portland, so I was really happy to grab this. This is Curtis. This is the debut album for Curtis Mayfield. Incredible record. Nice photography, beautiful cover. I love his yellow suit. So Curtis Mayfield was originally with a band called The Impressions. It was kind of a soul group. He wrote a lot of songs with them. He wrote the song People Get Ready. Great spiritual gospel soul song. Been recorded by hundreds and hundreds of artists from all across many genres, including a version by Rod Stewart with Jeff Beck playing guitar. If you haven't heard it, it's fun listen. But anyway, after he left the Impressions, he went solo and came up with this album. This is an incredible album. This is a first pressing on his own label called Curtum. Trying to remember. Yeah, this is a Monarch pressing as well. So I love those Monarch pressings. They just sound so good. The album is interesting looking at it. It's got some, hairlines and stuff on it, but it played really clean. So I was really happy about that. Amazing album. Curtis, after doing this, he later on did the album Superfly, which was a soundtrack to a movie, which really took off for him. He later on, with his political and social activism, added that to his music and his songs, and he just got edgier and funkier, had psych elements to it. It's really great music, and it was fun to listen to. Finally, a first pressing, especially a Monarch pressing of this. So this next album is by an artist that I love, and I don't own all of his records. I have a lot of his early stuff, and then in the middle and the end, I have just a smattering of this and that. So this is an album I don't have. In fact, I don't have the rest of the trilogy that followed this album. It's called Low by David Bowie. So this came out in 1977. It was his 11th studio album, and again, it's part of the Berlin trilogy. They were recorded in Berlin, and this is during a time when David Bowie was kicking his drug habit. He moved to France. He was hanging out with the likes of Iggy Pop and Brian Eno, and so the influences are impressive. The album is very different than what he was doing before this. There's a lot of electronic, ambient, krautrock influences on this album and on the trilogy, which include Heroes and Lodger. So those three albums are called the Berlin Trilogy. I don't have the other two, but after hearing this and spending some time with it, I'm going to look for those as well. This is a first U.S. pressing, RCA, Black Labels. This is cut by Greg Calby at Sterling Sound, so it's a really nice, warm to hot cut. Calby's really good at cutting albums. This is a first pressing and also a promo copy, not for sale, on the back of the cover. And I don't know, there's nothing else on the back of the cover, and I don't know if that's just for the promo, or if maybe all the albums are blank on the back. Anyway, David Bowie, great album. Really happy to have a first pressing of this. So this next album, again, is one that I've been looking for mostly because it's not like one of my favorite records, but a friend of mine in the community told me that this is really worth listening to and worth having. It's the original master recording version of Sea Change by Beck. The original came out in 2002. This is a 2009 MoFi reissue. This is a numbered album. It's number 5,548, special limited edition. I don't know how many total that were made, so I have no idea. But it's a 45 RPM MoFi reissue, remaster. I did listen to it. It's beautiful. I'm a fan of Beck. I like his less produced music. His older stuff was a little more lo-fi, a little more raw and edgy, but almost everything he's done has been good. This album doesn't have a lot of reverb. It's not overproduced. It's pretty sad, almost bleak songs. This album is the album he put out after the end of a 9-year relationship that ended with an affair. And I think he was pretty bleak and sad inside. But it's beautiful to listen to how he puts his feelings into music. It's a great album, and the MoFi release is still in high demand and sells for a lot of money these days, so it was nice to get a copy of this. Speaking of Beck, there's another album of his that I did not have. This is a first pressing of Morning Phase. This is a companion album to Sea Change, so it's great that I got to get both of these records out of this collection. This one still has a shrink on it. It's in incredible condition. This is, I think, his 11th album or 12th album. I think it's the 12th album, but it's the first album he did on Capitol. There's a little poster and some the songs and lyrics and stuff on the back of that. These interesting Capitol labels they put out later with color. This is the black Capitol label. This album, again, it's a little bit on the melancholy side. It's definitely a relaxed album. It's very well produced. It's beautiful to listen to. It won a Grammy for the best engineered non-classical album. It also won a Grammy that year for the top album in the rock genre. So it got a lot of attention. This was mastered by Bob Ludwig, cut by Bernie Grumman at Palace in Germany. So really well put together record, beautifully mastered, beautifully cut, beautifully recorded. I think even the orchestral arrangements on this were done by Beck's father, David Campbell. I think he did them on both Sea Change and this album. So, you know what, I was just remembering, Sea Change, I wondered why he called that. I wasn't familiar with that as a term or a phrase, so I looked it up a while back ago. And SEA, change, means a dramatic shift or transformation in something. Like when the sea changes, I think it's pretty dramatic, like big waves and stuff like that. So anyway, just thought I'd share that. Great album. Really happy to have first pressing of this as well. I have here another Mobile Fidelity original master recording, an album that I've been wanting to get a hold of for a long time. It's Muddy Waters Folk Singer. This album originally came out in 1964 on Chess Records. It was on their black label. This is a Mo-Fi reissue. It was his fourth studio album, and it's all acoustic. It's like an unplugged Muddy Waters. There's even a young Buddy Guy on this album with him, playing along on acoustic guitar. There are 4 tracks on this album that didn't exist on the original, and the style of the album, they called it folk singer because at the time in 1964, folk music was very popular, and they're trying to step into that genre. So they did an all acoustic album, which is mostly blues, but with some folk influences, and called it folk singer to try and sort of ride along on the tail of the folk singing, the folk music trend that was happening. This was not a bad selling album for him at the time, but it wasn't a great album. But it has since been revered by many and been reissued a number of times. And I think there's another reissue by Mo-Fi coming out that's going to be 45 RPM. So looking forward to that as well. Incredible record. Love this album. Really happy to find. And this recording is quite good. I have a number of Mobile Fidelity. I should put together a video and just show all of my original master recording Mobile Fidelity. That'd be a fun video to do, so maybe I'll try and pick that up after the first of the year. So that's all I have for today. This is the last video I'm going to do on the Coleman collection. I have many more records from the collection, but I just wanted to show a broad range of some of the stuff I picked up. The stuff that got me really excited, and also across several genres to make it interesting. So I hope you enjoyed that. Please check out Mazzy's channel. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, he's not doing any more sales at this point, but he does still have a garage full of records. And if you're in the Pacific Northwest, you could probably make an appointment and pick up a handful of still really great records that are left from that collection. So thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you soon. Okay, we're done.